Putin's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 will go down as one of the greatest blunders in the 21st century. It was supposed to be a 3-day special military operation where Putin believed that Ukrainians will actually cheer on Russian soldiers once they enter Kyiv. In fact, some Russian troops were so badly informed that they had packed their parade uniforms in hopes of celebrating in the Ukrainian capital in the coming days. Unfortunately for Russia, Kyiv did not fall in days as they expected, and 72 hours has now turned into more than 3 years. Putin may not want to admit this, but Russian losses are getting difficult to hide. Just yesterday, Russian casualty figures crossed 900,000. Situation has gotten so grim that Russia is forced to spend millions just expanding its cemeteries, and even that amount is not enough. Russia has now started to bury its soldiers in mass graves on the front lines. Here are more details. Is that a common thing? That's what I wanted to ask you, like burying people in the battlefield?
Absolutely. There's a good reason and a bad reason for that. The Russian officers do not want to report their actual casualties. That's the reason, that of course looks the way it looks. This is a slightly better look. They will also take someone who they know is dead, but they will carry them as living on the books. And one result of that is their family keeps getting paid. But in this case, we've got a mass grave with, 6,000 Russian casualties. Look, that's not insignificant, right? To put that in scale, look, 1,500 people were killed at Pearl Harbor, right? This is 6 times that much, and this is only one graveyard in one place. And again, you've got Russia has never reported its casualties. The British Defense Intelligence and the Ukrainian Armed Forces, they report the casualties.
Now, as you guys just heard, Russia actually does not disclose its casualty figures, but UK Ministry of Defense has been tracking Russian casualties and Ukrainian casualties since the beginning of this war. Here's the report that they published just yesterday, March the 20th. The Russian armed forces have likely sustained approximately 900,000 casualties, killed and wounded, since invading Ukraine in 2022. Of these, it's likely 200,000 to 250,000 Russian soldiers have been killed, Russia's largest losses since Second World War. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Russian military leadership highly likely prioritize their conflict objectives over the lives of Russian soldiers. Yep, that's correct. And here I have a funny meme that's been going around in Ukrainian armed forces that I want to show you guys. Kyiv and Moscow agree on one thing. It seems the Ukrainian army and the Russian command have one very important thing in common. We don't give a damn about how many Russians die. The humor encapsulates the truth here. Anyways, let's get back to the Ministry of Defense report. Russian leadership is most certainly prepared to tolerate continuously high casualty rates, so as long as this does not negatively affect public or elite support for the war, and those losses can be replaced. Putin and Russian leadership highly likely place significantly less value on the lives of ethnic minority Russian citizens from impoverished regions, with Russian recruitment efforts consequently focused disproportionately on these areas. Slavic Russians from urban centers such as Moscow and St. Petersburg have contributed disproportionately fewer service personnel than their poorer ethnic minority compatriots. Now, that last part is definitely correct. Putin would much rather prefer that funerals of all these dead soldiers are held far, far away from urban centers like Moscow and St. Petersburg. All the elites live in these major cities, and once Putin starts killing off elite sons, Russian moms have a habit of overthrowing the government. Now, I am being a little hyperbolic, but it's important to remember that after the Afghan-Soviet War, it was the Russian moms who forced the Soviet government to pull out of Afghanistan because of losses. But there's also another reason why so many Russian losses are made up from these minority regions outside Moscow and St. Petersburg. That reason is basic economics. You see, Russia is offering bigger and bigger bonuses to attract conscripts to sign up for its armed forces forces. And these minority regions outside of the major cities, they are not very well economically developed. So they provide fewer opportunities and job opportunities for all the people who live there. And that's why so many of these people turn to the bonuses that Russian military is providing and accept it. Because if you have no job prospects, you are willing to accept a job even if your life is at risk. In fact, this is the same reason why in many third world countries you see many young people turn towards gang-related activities because they don't have any other way of making money. This is when it's important to remember what late Senator John McCain said about Russia. Russia is just a gas station run by mafia masquerading as a nation. That quote will live in infamy. Another quote about Russia that will live in my brain until I die is something that was said by the Google CEO Sergey Brin. He was in fact born in the Soviet Union, but his family migrated to the United States before the fall. When he visited back to Russia once he was a little bit older, he called it Russia is just Nigeria with snow. And if you look at the economic data, you can see why he said that. I love how most of the quotes about Russia is just different ways of saying that Russian government doesn't treat its citizens very well.
It also reflects their insecurity. I mean, they know once you get outside of Moscow, and if you're not one of the super wealthy there, it sucks in Russia. I mean, it sucks. A country that has endless amounts of natural resources, everybody there should be wealthy. I mean, there's so much oil and gas and so many other things, but because of the legacies of corruption, instead of everybody there getting dividends like they do in Norway or Canada or some other countries, only a few people get to keep everything and everyone else is kept in the same squalor that they've had since the beginning. And so it's not in the interest of the Kremlin when you have countries on their border start becoming very prosperous when they join the West. So like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, 3 former Soviet republics, Poland and Romania, former Warsaw Pact countries. Now these guys are all, because of membership in the EU, because of the freedoms that are there, and big countries are investing in them. The quality of life right on the border of Russia is significantly better than it is for the average Russian. And so Putin absolutely couldn't bear the idea of Ukraine, who they always thought of as like their little brother or something, and I don't mean that in a friendly, fraternal sort of way, but somebody that they could dominate. Now Ukrainians, society is open, it's much more successful. People are able to use their potential. Countries want to invest in Ukraine. And so you could imagine the Kremlin looking at that and then having to explain to their own people why life sucks so bad in Russia and it's so good in Ukraine. Now that I'm simplifying a little bit, but I think part of this is their insecurity and their own regime survival.
No, yeah, that makes sense, because Russians, they brag so much about like the second biggest military, second biggest country, I guess the biggest country, but like, they try to claim that they're the second very powerful in the country, but the living standards are below that of Mexico for the average Russians, which is just crazy to think about.
Yeah, well, I mean, how do you define greatness? I mean, what is great? Yes, they have thousands of nuclear weapons, without a doubt, and they have endless amounts of natural resources, but yet they are the second best army in Ukraine. I mean, they have not been able to defeat Ukraine. Their navy has been defeated by the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians don't even have a navy in the traditional sense. Their Air Force, the great Russian Air Force, with huge advantages, failed its 2 main tasks. They have failed to achieve air superiority, and as a result, they also have failed to interdict the lines of communication, the supply routes over which weapons and ammunition from the West move from Poland into Ukraine. Not one train or convoy has been destroyed. So this legacy of corruption inside of Russia and absolute concentration of wealth in a few hands and the oppression that's there is what keeps Russia from really being the great country that it could.
As you guys can tell, I love remembering quotes, and there's a great quote that highlights the corruption in Russia. Putin's loyalty runs so deep that he has given his friends half the country. Hopefully you guys find it as interesting as me, but now let's get back to Russian casualties. Another big reason why Russian casualties are so high is because of the Russian tactic of meat wave assault. This is basically how Russia gains any ground in any battlefield and takes over Ukrainian trenches. Step 1 is they just send over a bunch of new recruits without much ammunition or training, and the whole goal of this wave of assault is to act as a sponge for Ukrainian bullets. Russian command is hoping that Ukrainians will run out of ammunition and they'll get tired while fighting this first wave, and then Russia will send in its second wave of a little bit more elite soldiers who can take on these Ukrainian soldiers who are likely tired and hopefully running low on ammunition. And this is how Russia has been gaining ground all over the front lines, especially in the last year. Russia is basically sacrificing hundreds of thousands of soldiers to just gain hundreds of square kilometers. It's just not worth it. But as the UK Defense Ministry said, Putin doesn't put a high value on the Russian soldier's life, so he's happy to sacrifice it. But a big problem with a tactic like this is casualties are extremely high, and Russia needs to constantly recruit people at a breakneck speed to replace all the people who have died or wounded. Luckily for Russia, they can just print money and recruit more and more people by offering them a bigger and bigger bonus. But unfortunately, you need time to train all these new conscripts, and Russia doesn't have time on the front lines. So they're basically sending in these soldiers without any training. As Chuck Farr likes to say, a Russian soldier likely has less training than someone who has played Call of Duty, and that's really saying something. Here's Chuck Farr explaining this whole training dilemma that Putin has.
One of the problems that Russia is already in, what Colonel John Spencer and I last year called the training death loop. We hear from Russian soldiers themselves that they often receive less than 2 weeks training before they find themselves on the zero line. And it essentially takes them 2 weeks to get there. So they're not really training, they're sitting on trains and buses and transit camps. So they arrive at the zero line without the fundamental training that a soldier needs, right? In the United States, it takes almost a year for an infantryman to receive his training. Basic training, infantry school, and some advanced schools. It takes basically 18 months to make a ranger. He'll go through all of those training, then ranger school, then jump school. It takes 2 years to train a Green Beret, 2 years to train a Navy SEAL. So you've got these people arriving on the battlefield. Notice I didn't say soldiers. These people, they don't know how to do the fundamental skills of a soldier: shoot, move, and communicate, right? You have to know how to use all the weapon systems you're supposed to be using, not just a rifle, mortars, RPGs, except dozens of weapons. They don't know how to use them. They don't know anything about land navigation. You give them a compass and a map, and they look at it like a hog looking at a wristwatch. So those are some of the reasons that these soldiers arrive. Russia can only carry out daylight assaults. They can only do operations in broad daylight. And we've all seen what a first-person drone will do to a soldier in broad daylight. So they're recruiting 30,000 people a month. They lose 30,000 people a month, and the quality of the individual soldier keeps.
Now, one of the most deadliest battle in this war has been the Russian offensive of Pokrovsk. Russia sacrificed more than 150,000 soldiers to take over this town, and they still have not succeeded. This is something we covered just a few weeks back, so here's that segment.
Lastly, as you guys know, over the last 2 weeks, few of our videos have been demonetized by YouTube for talking about sensitive topics and covering violent events. This is why recently we opened up memberships on the channel. This way you guys can directly support our content. Again, you don't have to do it. We'll continue making the videos, but if you enjoy the content and you're able to support us, you can do so by signing up for our membership. It costs less than a cup of coffee at Starbucks, and it's greatly appreciated.
Putin is losing to Ukraine, and he is losing badly. The Battle of Pokrovsk, an ongoing campaign that is part of the larger Russo-Ukrainian war, has fully exposed Putin for the incompetent leader that he is. On this one battlefield in Pokrovsk, Russia has lost more tanks in single battle than ever before. And it has lost more soldiers than the entirety of the British Army. Yeah, you heard that right. Over 150,000 Russian troops have suffered casualties in this one deadly region. But what makes this seemingly ordinary city in eastern Ukraine the focal point of an intense and brutal conflict? Why are thousands risking their lives for Pokrovsk, a name that might be unfamiliar to many? The answer lies right here in this video. This ongoing battle in Pokrovsk is not just another chapter in the Russo-Ukrainian war. It is a critical clash that holds the key to understanding much more about the broader conflict. In all likelihood, the outcome of this entire war just might be decided on the plains of this region. Welcome to our deep dive into the Battle of Pokrovsk, Putin's biggest miscalculation of the war. Now, before we dive into the intricate details of Putin's greatest blunder of the war so far, let's take a step back and provide context to this Pokrovsk area. Let's talk about why Putin wants it so much and why Ukraine is fighting tooth and nail to keep it. This right here is Pokrovsk, also once known as Krasnoarmysk. It is a city and the administrative center in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region. Its significance extends far beyond just being another dot on the map. It's a critical logistical and economic hub that both Russia and Ukraine are fighting fiercely to control. Historically, Pokrovsk's economy has been bolstered by its rich deposits of coking coal, an essential component for steel production. This has made the city indispensable to Ukraine's industrial landscape, particularly for its steel industry, which is a major economic driver. Losing control of Pokrovsk would significantly impact Ukraine's steel output, further weakening the nation's suffering economy and its overall military capabilities. For the Russians, control over such a vital resource means control over a significant portion of Ukraine's economic lifeline and a significant blow to Ukraine's overall economic stability. Even from a geographical standpoint, Pokrovsk's location made it a crucial node in the region's logistics network. It's situated along key roads and rail routes that facilitate the movement of military supplies and reinforcements. This logistical advantage is also why both Russia and Ukraine are keen to control the city. In this sense, for Russia, capturing Pokrovsk would mean disrupting Ukraine's military supply lines and gaining a strategic foothold in the Donetsk region, which is part of their broader goal of establishing control over eastern Ukraine. For Ukraine, maintaining control over Pokrovsk is vital to ensuring the continued flow of supplies to its forces. Not just in Pokrovsk, but also in other embattled towns in the region. As we have seen with many demoralized and struggling undersupplied Russian soldiers, logistics can make or break a war effort, and Ukraine is guarding against the latter. With Pokrovsk being a prize that both sides are unwilling to lose, the battle for Pokrovsk, an offensive that started last year, has begun to grow ferocious this year. The offensive was mainly marked by key battles that have since changed the tide of the entire war. The defense of Avdiivka is one of those battles, and it stands as a testament to the resilience and determination of Ukrainian forces in the ongoing conflict with Russia. This battle, which started in October last year, stretching to February of this year, was marked by some of the bloodiest and most intense fighting that the entire Russian-Ukraine war has ever seen. Russian forces decided to capture Avdiivka, a city in the Donetsk Oblast in Ukraine, as it served as a crucial frontline city, offering a gateway to other strategic locations like Pokrovsk. To achieve this, Russian forces launched a multi-pronged attack, utilizing heavy artillery, airstrikes, and ground assaults to break through Ukrainian defenses. The initial onslaught was fierce, with Russian troops making significant gains on the outskirts of the city. The use of advanced weaponry, including tanks and armored vehicles, gave Russian forces a considerable advantage in the early stages of the battle. However, Ukrainian forces, well aware of the strategic importance of Avdiivka, were prepared for a prolonged and grueling defense. They established multiple lines of defense around the city, fortifying key positions, and utilized a combination of conventional and guerrilla warfare tactics. Ukrainian troops took advantage of Avdiivka's urban environment, transforming buildings, streets, and alleyways into fortified positions. Snipers were deployed on rooftops, and key buildings were reinforced to create strong defensive lines. This urban warfare strategy allowed Ukraine forces to effectively counter the Russian advance, inflicting significant casualties on the attacking troops. One of the critical aspects of the Ukrainian defense was the effective use of artillery and air support. By coordinating artillery strikes with ground maneuvers, Ukrainian forces were able to disrupt Russian attacks and counter their advances. The use of drones for reconnaissance and targeting enhanced the accuracy and effectiveness of these strikes. In many instances, Ukrainian artillery successfully neutralized Russian positions, preventing them from gaining a foothold in key areas. The resilience of Ukrainian forces was further bolstered by the support of local civilians, who played a crucial role in the defense of Avdiivka. Civilians provided valuable intelligence, assisted in fortifying positions, and supported the logistics of the Ukrainian military. This collaboration between the military and civilians not only strengthened the defense, but also bolstered the morale of the defenders. Despite their initial gains, Russian forces faced significant challenges in their attempt to capture Avdiivka. The Ukrainian defense was tenacious, and the urban environment of the city made it difficult for Russian troops to maintain their momentum. The prolonged nature of the battle also strained Russian supply lines and logistics, further complicating their efforts. By early this year, it became evident that the Ukrainian defense had successfully stalled the Russian advance. The combination of well-coordinated artillery strikes, effective urban warfare tactics, and the unwavering determination of Ukrainian forces had prevented Russian troops from capturing Avdiivka. On February 17th of this year, Ukrainian forces then launched a decisive counteroffensive, pushing Russian troops back and reclaiming lost territory. This counteroffensive marked the turning point in the battle, solidifying the Ukrainian defense and securing the city. However, given the strategic importance that Pokrovsk holds, Putin wasn't going to give up on it that easily. And so after many minor skirmishes, he relaunched a massive attack. This massive offensive became known as the Battle of Kurakhove. Your support for our content is always appreciated, especially when we have Putin's bots and the algorithm heavily suppressing our reach every time we talk about war topics. So please keep liking and sharing our content, as that greatly helps us. Thank you. The Battle of Kurakhove, which began just 2 months back on October 16th, has played a crucial role in the border conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Russian forces launched a multi-directional offensive towards Kurakhove, a key logistical hub in the Donetsk Oblast, aiming to encircle and capture the city. Kurakhove was not just a standalone target, it was meant to be used as a stepping stone to the real prize, Pokrovsk. The capture of Kurakhove would allow Russian forces to press their advantage towards Pokrovsk, further threatening Ukrainian defense positions and disrupting their logistical operations. To this end, Russian troops advanced from Hronik in the north, Krasnohorivka in the east, and Vuhledar in the south. By late October, Russian troops had captured the nearby settlement of Avdiivka, bringing them dangerously close to encircling Kurakhove. Their strategy was to cut off Ukrainian supply routes and isolate the forces by defending the city in a siege-like manner. In response to this attack, Ukrainian forces, particularly the 79th Separate Assault Brigade from Mykolaiv, mounted a formidable defense. Utilizing coordinated artillery and drone strikes, they managed to repel several Russian attacks and prevent the encirclement. Ukrainian troops also launched counterattacks to disrupt Russian supply lines and regain key positions. These efforts were vital in preventing the Russians from fully capturing Kurakhove. At times, Ukrainian forces executed strategic withdrawals to regroup and launch more effective counteroffensives, ensuring they maintained control of critical areas. Unlike the Russian army, which has been plagued by poorly trained conscripts, mercenaries, and prisoners, Ukraine's forces consist of well-trained, disciplined, and well-armed forces. This undoubtedly played a part in turning the tide of the battle. There have been massive casualties, and Ukrainian President Zelensky reported that the Russian army has suffered record losses in battles and assaults during November and December of 2024. With approximately 3,000 Russian casualties in the Pokrovsk sector alone over the past 2 weeks. Despite this, Putin is unwilling to retreat and give up, and he has been throwing soldiers and weapons at the region in pursuit of Pokrovsk. This has dragged the battle on every day, and as it stands, we have no end in sight. Despite the advances made by Russian forces, Ukrainian defenders have successfully prevented a complete takeover of the city. This, however, is not as consoling as, right now, the Battle of Pokrovsk remains a focal point of the conflict in eastern Ukraine. Russian forces keep making significant advances and have now captured several settlements east and southeast of Pokrovsk, including Hronik, Krasnohorivka, Novohorodivka, Zeledova, and Ukrainisk. The fighting has intensified, with Russian troops now within 6 to 10 kilometers of the city. Despite the danger, approximately 11,000 people remain in Pokrovsk, with local authorities urging evacuation. Ukrainian forces have continued to mount a resilient defense, employing coordinated artillery and drone strikes to repel persistent, spirited Russian attacks. Current reports show that Russian troops are closing in on Pokrovsk from the east and the south. According to different sources, Russian forces are between 1 and 3 kilometers away from the city's logistics hub on the western edge of Ukraine's Donetsk region. This means that the fighting is going to intensify over the next few days, as no one wants to suffer defeat, primarily because capturing the city is of grave importance. Kurakhove serves a strategic point that provides access to Pokrovsk, and its capture would certainly make it a lot easier for Russian forces to advance towards Pokrovsk. For Ukraine, losing Pokrovsk would mean a significant disruption of their logistics and supply lines, weakening their defensive capabilities and dealing a severe blow to their industrial resources. That is why they are fighting so hard to prevent it from happening. For Russia, capturing Pokrovsk would enhance its overall control over the Donetsk region, strengthening its strategic position and serve as a major propaganda victory. This is why Putin keeps throwing more and more soldiers into this offensive. However, fierce fighting means fierce losses, and this is the main hallmark of the Battle of Pokrovsk. The ongoing battle has exacted a heavy toll on both sides. The human cost of the battle is staggering, with Russian forces suffering over 150,000 casualties in their attempts to capture Pokrovsk, including significant losses in tanks, armored vehicles, and other military equipment. Nearly 600 Russian tanks have been destroyed in the offensive, and around 1,220 armored vehicles have been damaged or destroyed. Additionally, approximately 90 artillery systems have been lost. Without exaggeration, what that means is that Russian casualties outnumber the entire headcount of the British Army. Yes, it's like having the entire British Army plus tens of thousands more all fall in one area in a 13-month time frame. As for the tanks and armored car losses, those eclipse the existing stockpiles of most European nations. In fact, this 13-month assault is the 5th largest battle in the history of the world in terms of armored car and tank losses. That has to tell you something about the ferocity of the fighting. Despite these losses, Russian troops continue to press forward, trying to breach Ukrainian defenses and capture the city. This is, perhaps, Putin's greatest error, to suffer such grave losses with little to show for it, and yet out of pride keep sending more and more soldiers to their deaths. Perhaps it is the only strategy that Putin knows, to attempt to outnumber the enemy at every turn. But, much like the battle with Georgia taught him, and now Ukraine, that is not always a viable strategy. On the Ukrainian side, the intense fighting has also resulted in significant casualties and equipment losses. However, it's nothing compared to Russia's losses. Ukrainian forces have faced continuous assaults, but their resilience and strategic use of resources has enabled them to hold their ground. The fortifications at some Ukrainian positions have even been critically damaged due to enemy fire. But despite all of this, their determination to defend Pokrovsk remains unwavering, and they continue to inflict considerable damage on Russian forces. What we need to remember, though, is that wars affect more than just the soldiers. And this leads us to our next point of consideration, the civilian toll. The Battle of Pokrovsk has not only been a significant military conflict, but also a humanitarian catastrophe. The ongoing fighting has severely impacted the civilian population, creating a crisis that extends far beyond the battlefield. As the battles have intensified, thousands of residents have found themselves caught in the crossfire, leading to a massive displacement crisis. Families have been forced to flee their homes, often with little more than the clothes on their backs, seeking safety in neighboring regions or even in makeshift shelters within the city itself. The sudden and chaotic nature of their displacement has left many without access to essential resources like food, water, and medical care. Naturally, this comes with a whole host of problems, including disease outbreaks, health concerns, and safety. For those who remain in Pokrovsk, daily life has become a struggle for survival. The fighting has caused significant damage to the city's infrastructure, disrupting basic services such as electricity, water supply, and sanitation. The destruction of homes, schools, and hospitals has left many without shelter or access to education and healthcare. Also, the psychological toll on civilians, particularly children, is immense, as they cope with the trauma of living in a war zone and the uncertainty of their future. For some, the war is burned into their minds and will haunt them for all of their lives. Attempts to get them help have been futile, hampered by the ongoing conflict. The constant threat of violence and the destruction of infrastructure have made it difficult to establish and maintain humanitarian corridors, which are essential for the safe passage of aid and the evacuation of civilians. Various organizations and local authorities have also faced significant challenges in delivering assistance to those in need. Despite these obstacles, efforts to provide humanitarian aid continues, given the gravity of those suffering. International organizations, in collaboration with local authorities, are working tirelessly to deliver food, water, and medical supplies to affected areas. Mobile medical units have been deployed to provide urgent care in viable areas, and temporary shelters have been set up to accommodate displaced families whenever possible. However, the scale of the crisis means that these efforts are often stretched thin, leaving many in desperate need and many suffering. One particularly heart-wrenching aspect of the humanitarian crisis is the plight of children. Many children in Pokrovsk have been separated from their families during the chaos of displacement. Schools have been destroyed or repurposed to shelters, disrupting their education and depriving them of a sense of normalcy. Child protection agencies are working to reunite families and provide psychological support to children who have witnessed the horrors of war. As always, it is the innocent that suffer, and the Battle of Pokrovsk is no different. On top of this humanitarian crisis, the economic impact of the conflict has also been severe. The destruction of industrial facilities, such as the coking coal mines, has led to widespread job losses and a sharp decline in economic activity. This has worsened the already dire living conditions for many families, pushing them further into poverty. Also, Pokrovsk is located in a region known for its agricultural production. Unfortunately, the conflict has disrupted farming activities, leading to reduced crop yields and economic losses for local farmers. In addition to this, many businesses have been forced to close due to the conflict, resulting in job losses and reduced economic activity. The uncertainty and danger associated with the fighting make it difficult for businesses to operate. The loss of livelihoods has left many unable to afford basic necessities, increasing their dependence on humanitarian aid, which oftentimes is not guaranteed. On top of these localized problems, the broader implications of the humanitarian crisis extended beyond Pokrovsk. The influx of displaced persons into neighboring regions has placed a strain on local resources and infrastructure, creating a ripple effect that is felt throughout the community. For a country already riddled with war, that means the effects are felt much more strongly than they otherwise would be. In response to these challenges, the international community has recognized the severity of the crisis and has stepped up efforts to provide support. Countries around the world have pledged financial aid and resources to help alleviate the suffering of those affected by the conflict. As of April this year, Congress has appropriated more than $174 billion to assist Ukraine. This includes funding to purchase missiles, ammunition, and combat vehicles for Ukraine. It also includes economic and humanitarian assistance to help those in Ukraine and neighboring countries affected by the invasion. The EU and its institutions have also donated tens of billions of dollars, showing solidarity with Ukraine and a commitment to the war effort. We'll dive deeper into this in just a few minutes. Despite this, the increasing scale of the conflict means that much more needs to be done to meet the urgent needs of the population and to ensure the safety and upkeep of civilians in a very unsafe time. Despite the overwhelming challenges, there have been stories of resilience and solidarity. Communities have come together to support one another, sharing whatever resources they have and offering shelter to those in need. Local volunteers have played a crucial role in delivering aid and providing care, often at great personal risk. Their efforts have provided a glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak situation. Perhaps it is partially due to this that Pokrovsk still stands today. The humanitarian implications of the battle also play into the strategic consideration for both sides. For Ukraine, the protection of civilians in Pokrovsk is a priority. Ensuring the safety and well-being of the population not only supports morale, but also strengthens the international community's support for their cause. This is crucial, as President Zelensky has been relentless in his efforts to secure donations to support Ukraine amidst the ongoing conflict with Russia. One of his standout initiatives is the United 24 platform, which he launched in May of 2022. This global crowdfunding site allows people from all corners of the globe to contribute funds for three critical areas: defense and demining, medical aid, and rebuilding the country. Zelensky's vision with United 24 was to create a centralized and transparent way for people to directly aid Ukraine, and the platform has been instrumental in gathering significant financial support. What makes United 24 particularly effective is its focus on transparency and accountability. Zelensky has made a point of providing daily updates on how the donated funds are being utilized, ensuring that donors can see the impact of their contributions. This level of transparency has been crucial in building trust and encouraging more people to donate. The funds collected through United 24 are directed to the Ukrainian Central Bank and then allocated to the relevant ministries for effective distribution and utilization. In addition to the United 24 platform, Zelensky has been actively engaging with the international community to garner support. He has addressed numerous parliaments and global forums, making impassioned pleas for aid and support. His speeches have often highlighted the dire situation in Ukraine and the urgent need for international assistance, resonating with many leaders and citizens around the world. These efforts have not only brought in financial aid, but have also helped in keeping Ukraine's plight in the global spotlight, ensuring continued support and solidarity from the international community. Zelensky has also formed partnerships with various cryptocurrency firms, recognizing the potential of digital currencies and providing swift and secure donations. These partnerships have opened up new avenues for fundraising, allowing people to contribute in a manner that is both convenient and efficient. The integration of cryptocurrency donations into the broader fundraising strategy has been a forward-thinking move, reflecting Zelensky's adaptability and willingness to embrace new technologies to support his country. Moreover, Zelensky has reached out to celebrities and influencers, leveraging their platforms to raise awareness and funds. High-profile endorsements and appeals from celebrities have significantly boosted fundraising efforts, drawing attention from their vast follower bases and encouraging more people to donate. This strategy of involving well-known personalities has added a layer of visibility and urgency to the fundraising campaigns, amplifying their reach and impact. The funds raised have been vital in sustaining the country's defense efforts, providing medical aid to those in need, and beginning the long process of rebuilding infrastructure damaged by the conflict. While the challenges remain immense, Zelensky's dedication and the continued support from around the world offer hope and resilience for Ukraine's future. This support has largely kept Ukraine in the fight against a larger and more well-equipped opponent. Conversely, for Russia, creating a humanitarian crisis could be used as a tactic to weaken Ukrainian resolve and force a withdrawal. The displacement of civilians and destruction of infrastructure can create additional challenges for Ukrainian forces, diverting resources and attention away from the front lines. Any resources diverted from the front lines are resources in reserve that could have been used against you. What is painfully obvious, however, is that as the battle for Pokrovsk continues, the strategic implications for both Russia and Ukraine remain of the highest importance. For Russia, capturing Pokrovsk would mean a significant territorial gain and a boost to their campaign in eastern Ukraine. It would disrupt Ukrainian supply lines, weaken their defensive capabilities, and provide access to crucial industrial resources. For Ukraine, maintaining control over Pokrovsk is essential for the logistical, economic, and moral considerations. It represents a symbol of resistance and national pride, as well as a vital point for the movement of supplies and reinforcements. Given that a lot of international actors have been watching this battle and the war play out, let's circle back and look at some of the reactions from the global community in detail. Firstly, let's talk about the global condemnation and the sanctions that have been imposed on Russia. Since the escalation of the Battle of Pokrovsk, there has been widespread condemnation from the international community. Countries like the United States, the United Kingdom, and members of the European Union have been at the forefront of this response. They've imposed a range of sanctions targeting various sectors of the Russian economy to cripple its ability to sustain its military operations. These sanctions include asset freezes, travel bans, and restrictions on financial transactions. Additionally, they have targeted Russia's oil and gas sectors, which are crucial resources of revenue for the country. Major multinational companies have also withdrawn their operations from Russia, further isolating its economy. Despite these measures, some countries, particularly in the global south, have maintained a neutral stance or opposed unilateral sanctions, arguing for a more balanced approach. Moving on to military aid to Ukraine, the international community has provided substantial support to bolster Ukraine's defense capabilities. The United States, the United Kingdom, and other NATO allies have supplied advanced weaponry, ammunition, and intelligence support. This military aid has been crucial in enabling Ukraine to mount a resilient defense against Russian advances. The aid includes sophisticated drones, anti-tank missiles, and artillery systems, which have significantly enhanced Ukraine's ability to counter Russian forces. For instance, the provision of Javelin anti-tank missiles has been particularly effective in neutralizing Russian armed vehicles. This is what has helped Ukrainians to litter the Pokrovsk battlefield with Russian tanks. Additionally, Ukraine has received training and logistical support from various countries, helping to improve the effectiveness of its military operations. This support has not only bolstered Ukraine's defensive capabilities, but also boosted the morale of its forces and civilian population, as they witness the tangible backing of the international community. This help has not just been physical, as various international organizations and countries have been actively engaged in negotiations and peace talks to find a solution to the crisis. The United Nations, the European Union, and the G7 have all played pivotal roles in mediating the conflict and advocating for a peaceful resolution. These diplomatic efforts have focused on several key areas. Firstly, there have been concerted efforts to de-escalate the situation on the ground, with calls for ceasefires and establishment of humanitarian corridors. These corridors are essential for delivering aid to affected civilians and evacuating those in immediate danger. Secondly, diplomatic efforts have aimed at bringing the conflicting parties to the negotiating table. High-level meetings and discussions have been held, with the involvement of key stakeholders to explore potential solutions and compromises. These efforts have been challenging, given the deeply entrenched positions on both sides, but they are crucial for any lasting resolution. We've yet to see permanent resolutions, but we are hopeful. Lastly, there has been a strong emphasis on promoting dialogue and cooperation at the regional level. Neighboring countries and regional organizations have been encouraged to play constructive roles in facilitating peace and stability in the region. The international response to the Battle of Pokrovsk has also highlighted the role of public opinion and civil society. Protests and demonstrations in various countries have called for an end to the conflict and greater support for Ukraine. Advocacy groups and NGOs have raised awareness about the humanitarian crisis, mobilizing resources and support for those affected. This grassroots activism has added pressure on governments to take a firm stand and provide assistance. The reality of this conflict is that the Battle of Pokrovsk will be remembered as one of the key battles of this war, much like it was during World War II. Given these significant implications for the future of the region and the broader conflict that is associated with this battle, it is unlikely that we will see an end to it soon. Putin will continue to throw everything he can at this region that has already swallowed up so many of his troops, while Ukraine will dig itself deeper to stop the Russian advance. We, on the other hand, hope that this can be resolved as soon as possible, as these casualty numbers are more than just statistics to us. They are people with families and friends. And with all that said, we want to hear from you. What do you think about the severity of this war and its casualties? Do you see Russia and Ukraine coming to a consensus, or is it too late for that? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your insights. We've got much more exciting content coming up on global wars, geopolitics, and much more. Join our community and be a part of the conversation. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.